everything that you add in the stage implies other things. He said other farms, and all of a sudden he's talking about changing the size of the level space. Potentially, if they're big enough, you're suddenly talking about streaming technology, so you can move from one to the other, or sectioning things up into shards. All of these things are hidden in the decision to add more farms, but you have to think about them at this point. You propose, and then you think, okay, what does that actually mean for the game?
And maybe the size of the vehicles,
Okay, so you're talking about the types and the sizes of the vehicles. Flying carpet, what difficulties would flying carpet add to this game?
A lot of technical requirements.
A lot of technical requirements. You know what else it would add? It would completely change the way you had to build your spaces. Because, let's face it, when you play Grand Theft Auto most of the time, where are you? You're on the street, right? Yep, you ever see the world from above? Only in a helicopter, so not a heck of a lot of the time. So, but what happens when you're up there? You see the whole world. Which means you can't do a small level and pretend it's big, because if you're flying, you see the edges of the world. And if the spaces have to be big enough that you can't see the edges because you're flying, that means you have to build bigger spaces. That means more artists. That means more assets. Things like that. All of these fall out of every little decision that gets made. Sorry.
No, I think we need some magic to bring the helicopters to the air.
Okay.
Yep.
Well, magic. If it's a fairy tale, can we have magic? Does it fit? The pixie dust, yes. But do we want to fly? Yes or no? Well, see, just because we think of it doesn't mean we have to put it in there. If we want to do it, then we bring up these other issues. It's not saying don't do it, but you have to be aware of them as you propose, because everything that you propose comes with a cost.
Yeah, that's because I think the flying does not have to do with the thriller of its history. But you may have, I don't know, a patch or a second type of game with the hunter and the girl in red, I don't know.
Little Red Riding Hood.
For the other story, the wolf, for example, you can have like a special patch or something.
Yeah, so it's a possibility, to consider down the road. But even if we can't do flying, like I said, we can do magic. Does magic fit? Yes. Okay. What do we want magic to do in this game? Blow something, make things blow up, help you find things. Yes?
Yeah, very good to blow something. Magic to blow something.
Well, something with vehicles, it would boost the speed.
So power-ups. Okay, so we have a role for magic in the game that fits the idea of the game, yes? And at this point, that's almost as deep as we need to go.
Yeah, a new abbreviation.
Great. So, at this point, we have our high-level feature set, we have our pitch. Now, what you would start doing, and I don't think we can do this here today, are a couple things. One, you would potentially start prototyping. You have your basic things that you want to do. You would be in a position to start building them and seeing if they work and seeing if they're fun. One of the things that you want to do is get these things going as soon as possible and tweak them as often as possible and get as many people looking at them as possible. Do you know how Microsoft does its playtesting? They run literally thousands of people in and out on their big games over the course of a multiple year development cycle. And they want you to see it once and give your feedback, and then you're done and you don't see it again. Because they always want to see how people feel about it, starting it from the very beginning all the way up to the polished product. And odds are you are not going to be in a place to do that, but the more prototyping and testing you can do, and the more you can play it and see if it's actually fun, then the better off you are. So what sort of things will we want to prototype?
Another question.
Yes.
What do you think about the use of prototyping in board games or card games before the digital game?
I prototyping, any way you can test a rule set is a good thing.
Yeah.
You know, I've seen prototyping done with card games, I've seen prototyping done with board games, I've seen prototyping done with miniatures, I've seen prototyping done electronically, representationally, any way you want to do it. If it's a play mechanic and you can test it, by all means find a way to test it no matter what that way is.
Very good, thank you.
Okay, so we've got prototyping, but what else are we going to do while we're prototyping?
Design doc? Design doc?
Design documentation, absolutely. I'll tell you a secret. At this point, the games are so big that it's very rare to have a single design document because they would be this thick. But you do start building a design documentation tree. And what goes into these? Concept art. What else? The important thing at this stage is scope. How many levels? How many vehicles? How long is the game going to be? You start mapping that out and the basic things that the player is going to be able to do, and that's the backbone of your design documentation structure. This is when you start doing that potentially. Okay, does that make sense? Okay, so who does the design documentation?
Game design.
Okay, it's a trick question. The designer does a lot of the work, yes, but should the designer be doing it by themselves? Okay, good. Jumped on the trick. Why not? Well, minions are good. It is because, contrary to most designers' belief, including my own, designers don't know everything. There are people in the building who will be better qualified to help you figure out how things should go than the designer. Whether that means talking to the expert, whether that's the person who's ultimately going to be implementing, or someone who is the acknowledged expert in the building on a topic, or things like that. Get them involved in the process, get their ideas, get them brainstorming, get them bringing stuff in. This is never a one-person job, but the core team really has to be involved to lay down the basic structure of the game. And the documentation that touches on their particular areas benefits from what they're doing, from their expertise, what they can bring in.
So, I think we need to put some time limit in the game.
Okay.
Yep.
So how long do you think this game should be?
Oh, it's for children.
Yep.
Yep. About 50 hours.
Okay, well 50 hours, that's a lot of content.
Yep.
So, you think,
Yep.
how long was Grand Theft Auto?
200 hours.
Okay, and how long did it take to make?
Quantas horas deve ter ficado no tempo?
4 years, 5 years? How much did it cost? $100 million plus. Okay, do you think we can squeeze a quarter of that out? Or are we better off going for something smaller that's more polished and maybe adding more content on the back end? These are the sorts of things you need to think about. If we want to have 50 hours of gameplay, how many levels is that going to be? How many spaces? How many characters are we going to need? How many quests is it going to take to build 50 hours worth of gameplay? Things like that. You have to think about all this, and you throw them out there, and you talk to people who will actually be doing it, and get their feedback, and build all of that information